Welcome back. So excited to share this conversation with Brian Hyman. He is such a wealth of knowledge, inspiration, and just this warm, delightful energy. I really enjoyed our conversation. He's a yoga instructor, meditation guide, Dharma teacher, author, and father. He has been sober since 2009, and he has been teaching yoga and meditation at Cliffside, Malibu since 2012. His dedicated work in the field of addiction treatment and recovery combines yoga and Buddhism. His innovative teachings about healing and transformation have been featured in many publications and podcasts. His book came out in February called Recovery with Yoga Supportive Practices for Transcending Addiction. I'm so excited to get my hands on a physical copy. I have read the digital, and I know it's something I just want to have as a resource beside my bed. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. Let's dive in. Welcome to Season 5 of the Wellness as a Way of Life podcast, the less is more source of wellness, knowledge, wisdom, and inspiration for female leaders and founders. Here, we teach you why not all wellness trends are for you, how to figure out which ones are, and how to best adapt them for your own personal wellness toolbox. Ultimately, we need to know how to integrate your wellness practices so fully that they become to feel like brushing your teeth, a foundational part of who you are and not a check mark on your to-do list. I'm your host, Megan Swan, creator of the Wellness as a Way of Life community and the Sustainable Integrated Wellness Approach. I have more than a decade of experience in the wellness industry and on my own personal journey, learning how to tune into and trust my intuition and drown out all the noise. As a certified health coach, detoxification expert, plant-based chef, yoga teacher, and consultant, I will help you distill down the information overload and feel more confident and at ease in your own skin. Welcome, Brian. It's an honor to have you on the podcast. And I've really enjoyed the offering that is your book, and I'm so looking forward to getting to know you better. So welcome. How are you?
I'm great. Hi, Megan. Nice to meet you. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, my pleasure. So your book, Recover with Yoga, Supportive Practices for Transcending Addiction, is to me this just beautiful almost handbook workbook that I would imagine you wrote with the idea that it's something that people go back to again and again. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your journey to writing it and how long you've been writing it in your head?
Yeah, that's a great question. The actual writing process was almost 2 years, but the actual lived experience that went into the writing of the book was 14 years of personal recovery. I've been sober for 14 years, so I can't discount all those years of just trying to figure out how to live life sober, which eventually became the rich soil, the material of this book. The book is based on universal principles so that anyone can relate to things like honesty, courage, patience, vigilance, and the yogic philosophy is something I was able to really tap into in my recovery. Something that really supercharged my personal recovery from alcoholism was not just a physical yoga practice, but the philosophy as well. And as you mentioned, the book itself, I do feel it is something that readers can go back to again and again. It wasn't intentional to make it something like that, but it just turned out through the writing process that a lot of inquiry questions came up. So one yogic practice is Atma Vichara. Atma means self. Vichara is inquiry. So simply, it's self inquiry, and a lot of the personal work that I've done in my recovery that's really helped me, that's really been a foundation, is that deep inner work, that inner questioning, the inner type of looking to see where I am today, what I'm feeling today. Um, and so a lot of the work based on these principles goes back to that. So I do feel that a lot of people can turn back to this book and use it as a resource throughout their entire recovery.
Yeah, you uh, draw the comparison or even just maybe the marriage between the practice and beauty of yoga and that of, let's say, recovery or the recovery process. Do you want to just define for us, like for you, what is recovery specifically?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've heard a lot of people. I work at a treatment center, and I've been there for 12 years. So some people, and especially I myself as well, when I first got sober, I was hearing these terms like sobriety, recovery. Lately, it's been things like sober curious or abstinent or moderation, and what do these terms mean? And so for me personally, and this is just how I define recovery, what works for me is to recover something is to make new again, to bring back to a state of wholeness or completeness, to make solid, to it's like if we have a computer and there's a virus running through the computer, we have to remove the virus to make sure the computer runs properly. So we have to remove things, make the system run again, which means we come back to some default settings, some original settings. So for me personally, what that looked like was recovery is not outside of me. I don't need to bring a bunch of stuff or things or ideas into me to find my wholeness or health or completeness. What I need to do is get the virus out, get the bugs out of the system. So it's old beliefs, it's limiting beliefs, it's conditioned behaviors, it's habit energies, it's stuff that I've somehow adopted as an operating system that really does not work for me. So the recovery process is to recover my natural state, which is I have what I need to be healthy. I have what I need to be whole within me if I can just get back to that place. So that's my working definition of recovery today is to recover what's there. Most of us have either lost it or we're not even sure it's even there. We're not aware of it. The whole process of yoga is a coming home to oneself. It's a journey of the self through the self to the ultimate self. It's never an outward search. So it's neat because yes, it is a marriage. Recovery and yoga, they're very similar or even parallel paths. And at some point, they just start to blend into each other, where I believe both of us take us home. Both practices of recovery and yoga are designed to help practitioners come home to themselves so they can really feel complete and whole.
Mm, yeah, I love that. And I think it's really about finding reconnecting, right? And I think well, both recovery and yoga, it's fundamental, this reconnection to self, and then also finding community. Can you speak to that in the parallels?
Absolutely. Yeah, without the community, it's almost like we're getting sober or finding our recovery in a vacuum. It will work for a little while and it may work for a long while for certain people, but I don't think it's as fun or enjoyable. And I don't think we'll learn as much as we could when we get a chance to bounce our thoughts and ideas and share our feelings and emotions with other people, like-minded, like-intention people, travelers on a similar path. When we do this work together exponentially, it is incredible. If I'm just by myself somewhere and just trying to figure something out, like I said, I'll figure something out, but it'd be so much easier if I can ask someone who's already figured it out, someone who's on the path ahead of me, say, hey, can I get some help? Do you know how to? I have no idea what I'm doing here. I could really use a hand. We both benefit because I get a chance to learn something, and the person who has some knowledge, some experiential knowledge, who's lived through something, gets to turn around and help someone else. We both benefit. The It's a very enriching process. You'll see this everywhere. In Buddhism, the Sangha is one of the three jewels. If for anyone who's familiar with the three jewels in Buddhism, it's the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. It's the teacher, the teachings, and the community. It's being with others. So when you go to yoga, you go to a class, you practice with other people. If you're in 12-step recovery, you go to a meeting with other people. So the community part is huge, and you see this everywhere. Whether if you go to a church, there's ministries. You go out and you do groups together. You do Bible study groups together. There's book month of a book club groups together. It's not a coincidence. You'll see this in many secular, non-spiritual realms as well, or worlds where it's just even sports. Athletes. There's something about being on a team with other people and you working toward a similar goal. Literally, you're all going toward the same end zone or finish line together. And there's something that's really amazing that happens when you're literally on the field, the battlefield, and same thing in addiction recovery. We're on a battlefield and we're trying to get to the same finish line. We're trying to get to the same direction. So we might as well go together because if we go together, we got a better chance of getting there than if we go individually with limited resources.
Yeah. I'm curious. I'm not sure how you would name them, but it's like each chapter is like a core value or a principle. I can't remember how many there are this exact moment, like 30-ish maybe. Is there in your mind like an intentional order, or how do you recommend that someone sort of pull on those threads?
Somebody asked me this recently if they could pick up the book and just start anywhere. I said, sure, you can do that, but they actually were ordered in a way where the recovery can build. So the first chapter is honesty. I believe without honesty, not many people will get much further without being honest to the best of their ability wherever they are today.
Mhm.
So the next chapter after honesty is acceptance. So once, let's say, for example, I'm an alcoholic and I can't stop drinking. If I can get honest about that, I have a chance of finding my sobriety and getting into recovery. I can accept that. I can move into the next layer or level. In this case, the next chapter is accept that I have an issue with alcohol or drugs or whatever the behavior is. If I can accept that, I can move into the next chapter, which is surrender. I can let go of whatever stigma or shame I might feel around that. I can let go of this idea that I shouldn't feel this way or I should be able to take care of this myself. I don't need help. And so each of these ideals or ethical codes, they're spiritual principles. They are ordered in a way where most people can kind of walk through these. All that said, for anyone who has been sober a while, who's been in the recovery journey for a while, should be able to pick up the book and just sort of flip it open somewhere and still be able to and still be able to enjoy something, read something, practice something.
Yeah. That's kind of how I read it. And I think I'm also curious because there's such a breadth of things that you draw on. And I love how you make it very accessible to someone who maybe doesn't even know anything about yoga. And also you bring in a lot of the more traditional specifics of the practices and Sanskrit and the mantras. It's so complete, but you must have been torn here and there on things that you can't put it all in there. Or how did you choose? And were they sort of like your personal favorite practices?
As things came up, I just felt if something came up, then that was the next right thing. That's the next thing to write about or try to incorporate or fold into the book. Not much was laid out as far as an outline. I had the 30 ideas or the 30 chapters, and I allowed it to unfold naturally. And one thing I did want to be careful with physical postures. With yoga, um, if someone is new to a physical practice and they don't have a teacher or some instruction, even if it's just a video online, there's a risk of injury. And the same thing with some of the more intense breathing exercises. So I was careful about adding in any type of pranayama or breathing exercises or any type of asanas, which are the physical postures, if they could be too challenging. And as you mentioned, if they're not widely accessible to to as many people as possible. So it's funny when people see the title "Recovery with Yoga." As you know, if you took a look at the book, if anyone takes a look at the book, there's not many physical poses in the book at all. It is what you mentioned. It's mantras, it's mudras, which are little hand gestures in places you'll place the fingers, and there's different chants, and a lot of it is the philosophy, like you mentioned, the Sanskrit. Once we start to pull apart some of these ancient words, it's really interesting how contemporary they are, how modern and relevant and accessible. And you don't need a degree in yoga philosophy. Very simple things, but very powerful. Just to start to look at how these old ideas really relate to recovery. They're really guiding us, like we talked about earlier, back to a whole version, complete version of who we truly are, our authentic self, our healthy self.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about accountability to oneself? Because I feel like, as a coach, this is something that I'm always, I'd say one of the core things that I do is provide accountability for my clients. But at the end of the day, it's to instill in them the ability to do it for themselves. And I love that you pulled intuition into it. And I just love to hear you to elaborate a little bit more on what that means to you.
Accountability was a big part of my recovery. I got sober in with 12-step philosophy, going to 12-step meetings, and the first thing that came to mind when you mentioned that was being accountable to a sponsor, which is someone who will take you through the 12 steps, and which means I need to be honest with this person, and I need to be forthright, and I need to be accountable, meaning tell this person what's really going on. Otherwise, they won't be able to help me. If I'm still lying about my disease, about my addiction, about my problems, I can't expect this person to be a mind reader and somehow give me the right medicine or the solution or the practice or the suggestion if I'm not even accountable to myself. So the way I laid it out in the book was three levels or layers was first accountability to oneself. So if I'm going to be on this path, in this case, recovery, then I have to be accountable to myself. There can't be a back door or a um, only when I feel like it type of attitude. And I'm not judging or blaming. I'm just sharing that for me personally, I've done that before and it just didn't work. If I'm not accountable to myself as best as I can be, I am going to lie to myself. I am going to cheat. I am going to try to do the least amount of work possible at the bare minimum. And I'm probably going to lie about it to whoever I'm working with. And the energy within me plus around me is going to get really foul. It's going to get really negative really quick. So the accountability is I'm doing this. I'm going to go for it to myself. I owe this to myself. I'm worthy of this. And that's a huge piece too, is the self-worth piece of being accountable to oneself is I deserve a good life. I deserve a healthy, happy, joyous life. Who am I not to have that? Why have I been living in this way where I've been poisoning myself and I've been hating myself and I've been not living up to my potential and enough is enough. And so that's how the accountability to oneself started for me was enough is enough. Oh, it's time to live your life. And the next level would be accountability to others, where I need to take this to another level, which means I've made this promise to myself. I'm going to do this. Now I have to actually tell someone so I can't go back to the old way anymore. Because once enough people know, then I'm kind of stuck. And I'm going to have people calling me saying, "Hey, how's that thing going? You going to those meetings, or that book study, or you still doing the yoga practice, or whatever that thing is you were talking about, the meditation?" And now I have these links in the chain, and that's the community that we talked about. And the last was accountability. I in the book I wrote accountability to God, but the idea is just any higher source, just knowing that you're part of the universe and you're integral to the workings of the universe, that we're all here for specific. If we took the honeybees out of the world, if we took the rivers out, the world wouldn't function. So meaning the accountability that the world needs your contribution. It needs my contribution, and it needs the contribution of every person that is here. If you're here for a specific reason. So let's have it. Be your true self and give us what you got, because only you can do it. And so that's another level of the accountability. It's pretty intense if you think about it, because it's the exact opposite of how we live in any kind of active addiction, which is, what's the point? Who am I? No one cares about me anyway, or I'm not good enough, or nobody wants to hear from me. And this idea of accountability turns that whole thing upside down and says, yeah, we need you. You're the one. Come on, let's suit up and show up. You got the goods. Come on.
Can you speak to some sort of more sneaky, subtle ways that people are maybe not accountable to themselves? Like you kind of laid out some, really direct, common ways that in early recovery, people sort of cheat themselves out of the process or, try not to or aren't ready to show up, or however you want to look at it. But I feel like you, for even someone who's not in recovery, there are ways that we are not accountable to ourselves, and we don't understand how it's this sort of vicious circle of, I love how you pointed to the energy that it's creating around you, and it's kind of like a pollution of sorts.
Yeah, the what comes up for me is just an idea of self-worth. The only thing that would keep me from being accountable to myself is thinking either I have low self-esteem, I have low self-confidence, I don't feel like I deserve to have a good life. Um, that's it's a shame and it's very sad. And I'm not sure where we get these ideas from, except it's childhood, it's trauma, it's culture, it's society, it could be a lot of different things, a combination. Regardless, I've been working in the field for a while. This book came out. I've been sober a while. I've seen that all this stuff can be overcome, which is neat. But as you mentioned, if we can stay away from the little the white lies, as they're sometimes called, oh, it's not a big deal. Let's say I want to get on a diet, and I say, oh, I want to lose 10 pounds. I want to get healthy. And then I'm at a party and they have the dessert buffet, and I think, what's the big deal? It's a party. That's one of these subtle little sneaky ways where if you really, if you really are going to walk this path, meaning even if we have to look into a mirror and actually say it to ourselves to really make that accountability valid, we're not going to go and raid the dessert table at the party. And we can talk ourselves out of a lot of different things. I'll get sober next week. I had a friend, I'll just share this. This might be a good example of what you're talking about, where he called me, and this was many, many years ago, and he said, I heard you got sober recently. Can you help me get sober? And I was blown away. I didn't know this person had a problem. And I said, sure. I don't really know what I'm doing, to be honest. It's only been a couple months or so, but I'll just give you whatever I got. He goes, okay, but I'm gonna call you in a few months though, because first I want to go to this party and I'm gonna be drinking there, and then I'm gonna go to this other thing out of town and I'm definitely gonna drink there, and then I'm probably gonna do some drugs and but I'll call you when I'm ready. And it's so the intention is there, the idea is there. This person wants health and wholeness and but first let me go party and then let me go on this vacation. And then it's at some point we have to shut the door and bolt it. If you're going to do this, do it. Don't leave any of these little back doors, these little trap doors, these little escape hatches open, because we'll crawl through every single time. So many of us, whether it's food or sex behaviors, or if it's drugs or alcohol, there's so many ways that we can find ways to sneak through. I mean, even as kids, like, "Oh, I'll do my homework later." It's that kind of be accountable, finish it. Why are you going to wait until it's the morning of and cram and be all stressed out about it? I don't know if it's a human thing or just it's probably just part of our human condition that we're 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 self-sabotaging. That's what it comes down to. And accountability is takes the self-sabotage and just smashes it with a hammer and says, "No more of this. Stop sabotaging your life. You deserve better." And we're the ones who give ourselves the better, which is, yeah, go to your meetings, go to treatment, stay on your diet, whatever it is. What happens is we get self-esteem and we get self-confidence and self-worth. It's it's not easy, but it's worth it.
Yeah. I, yeah, I was that person who was like looking for the best time to get sober, for a while, of course. And then I realized, like, given my lifestyle built around this addiction, there's never going to be a good time. Like, there's always going to be another party or a wedding or whatever. And then it makes, so I'm curious, for me growing up, I think I was saturated in a drinking culture, if you will, where it just wasn't cool to be disciplined and show up for yourself or do all these things that, you know, really do improve, solidify self-confidence, improve your self-worth. Just doing what you actually say you're going to do is so rewarding. Um, Yeah, for me, I actually found yoga before I found recovery. Um, Yoga was like my gateway drug, if you will, into but I found the discipline when I quit drinking in running. I switched all that time and energy to train for in running. And I'm curious for you, was the yoga, were you already practicing yoga, or did you find it after recovery or during recovery?
Yoga, as I know it now, I found in my recovery. I had practiced it as a class at the gym well before I got sober, and then it was just a class at the gym. It was just stretching. There was a little bit of that spiritual thing happening, but I didn't know what was happening, and I didn't really explore it. I wasn't in the mindset, I wasn't in the right place or time, physically, spiritually, emotionally, to even go near that. I was like, it was kind of weird. It was stretching. Whatever. Let's keep moving. And when I had about a couple months sober, that's when I was doing yoga and really started to see that this was so much more than stretching, so much more than a class at the gym. I started to find just so many benefits. And for me, and I think one of the reasons there's not that many physical poses in the book is the physical poses didn't teach me personally. And this is just my story. And this is nothing against yoga or the poses or anyone who teaches a lot of poses. Just sharing my story, which is for me, I started to learn how to concentrate and how to quiet my mind and how to really focus and how to really stay present and really ground myself. And these were essential. These were fundamental to somebody who grew up in a way and lived a life that was so frenetic and so erratic and so. I was so all over the place and I couldn't concentrate and I couldn't sit still and I couldn't have just one thought in my mind. And to find these things on this piece of rubber, this yoga mat, were just, it was incredible. And back to accountability, the only way they took hold was I took a 30-day yoga challenge early on in my practice. I had about maybe, no, I not even maybe, I know it was 87 days sober because somebody asked me around the time something about sobriety, and I happened to say, I didn't know at the time, you're not supposed to really, put this out there, but I was like, oh, I got 87 days sober. But I said that in front of a bunch of people who weren't sober, and I think it just kind of fell on deaf ears. Like, what's he talking about? Who asked about that? Um, but again, I think that was in my mind. Uh, but I remember I had 87 days sober, and I was doing this 30-day yoga challenge. And part of the challenge was take one class a day every day for 30 days. You could take the weekends off if you wanted to, or 2 days a week off. And that was when I think I first learned about accountability in recovery and yoga and how they started to go together because I did it with a friend. And so her and I would call each other or text each other and we would say, what class you taking today? Which time are you going today? And then I was accountable to her. I was accountable to myself. I was accountable to the practice and the studio and the community around the studio. It was huge. And after that 30 days, you better believe I felt like I accomplished something. I felt proud of myself, which was really hard to do in early recovery, to really feel good about being an alcoholic, being a liar, being a cheat, being a scammer, whatever it is. But I finished those 30 days and I felt really good about myself that if I can do that, what else can I do? Let's bring it on. Bring on the next challenge.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt with running at the time. I love that. And I think, you know, the accountability is individual, but then it's so much easier if there's, friendship or community combined. I also loved in your book, I'd love if you can elaborate and talk about divine time, because that was another thing when I got sober. It was just so much easier to get up early. I naturally woke up early, and that was what I realized over time is, and certainly as a mother, like the precious hour when the house is quiet, I can meditate, and the quietness, and just go within. I love how you talked about it in the book.
That was one of those terms early on when I started hearing some of these Sanskrit terms. when I was in classes with teachers that actually would talk about philosophy. They would thread it in, they would weave it into the teachings. We would be doing vinyasa flow practices, power yoga practices, and some teachers during this time here in Los Angeles, they would weave in the philosophy, and I just thought it was incredible because certain terms or ideas really stood out to me personally, and one was this divine time, Brahma Muhurta. Brahma is God or divine, and in the morning time, Muhurta. It was neat because it's just, it's that morning time like you talked about. It's about 90 minutes or so before before the sun rises, but it's also before the rest of the world wakes up. So there's no traffic, there's no sirens, there's no coffee makers gurgling, there's no screaming kids yet. And what we're taught in many of the yogic scriptures is that if you can get up at this time, do your sacred, special spiritual practices during this time, they have that much more power because you're able to concentrate more and you're able to really utilize that special time and connect with God, your higher power, your highest self, without all the interruptions and distractions. And they're not just external. I think many of us can relate to if you're going to meditate at 4 a.m. versus 4 p.m. At 4 a.m., if you're able to get up and do that, there's not going to be much on your mind. At 4 p.m., you've already seen so many text messages, so many emails. You've maybe watched the TV news. You've maybe read some things on the internet. Your mind is going to be pretty full. It's going to be pretty hard to get the same type of quiet that you would get at 4 a.m. So it's a very incredible, special time. And then again, this wasn't something I didn't just hear about. I tried this, and so I didn't really have a choice. Actually, the first time I did a yoga teacher training, we started pretty early in the morning. It was 6 a.m., and I lived about an hour away from the studio, so I had to get up at 4 o'clock. And before I got in the car and drove out to the studio to start, I would meditate. And I know this is in West Hollywood. This is in Los Angeles, and at that time, there's not much noise, and it was incredible. I thought, wow, it's two different cities
Hmm.
between this time, this divine time in the morning that they were talking about all these thousands of years ago in the yogic scriptures. They didn't mean you had to be in a cave in India. I was in the middle of Los Angeles doing it, and I thought, wow, this is really neat. Yeah, it's special. And you can carve that out. It doesn't have to be 4 a.m. for anyone. You could make up your own divine time. I think I add that somewhere in the book. The idea that whatever can be sacred and special and set aside for you, make that your divine time. It doesn't have to be 4 a.m. So if anyone was listening and thought, I can't get up at 4 a.m., that's fine. You don't need to. Pick a time. Maybe some people like it at night. Their day is done. Maybe they take a hot bath and with some essential oils, and maybe that's their divine time. It's any time that you can come home to the divinity within you, whatever you can connect to or associate with that idea. That's special time for you.
Yeah, I really like how you wrote it in that there are invitations to personalize things and make it sustainable and practical for you and meaningful. Yeah. So I think part of the importance and the art of the book is practice, right? That's one thing I like about yoga. It's and I do love that you really kind of moved away from the asanas and focused, or the physical practices that most people are probably more familiar with, and focused on the richness of the rest of what yoga has to offer. Um, but for me, it's been just so informative over the last 15 years. It's just something you can always come back to. And the the beauty of the beginner's mind, like it's the same practice, but there's always something new to come back to.
Yeah, I feel that I agree. The beginner's mind, if it's from the Zen perspective or a Buddhist perspective, or even from just a regular, just a regular view, without any kind of religion or practice attached to it, that open mind, that teachable mind, and knowing that this is a never-ending journey. There's no finish line. It's not a competition or a group sport. Yoga is a practice. What came to mind as you were sharing was my practice and what I'll share often with patients or students or people I work with in the field of addiction treatment is your practice will meet you wherever you are. So if you're brand new, your practice will meet you there at brand new. And good for you because you don't have all the extra baggage in your mind like a lot of us who've practiced for many years. We think we know what yoga is. So I'll share it with anyone. I have the same suggestion, whether you've been practicing for years or if it's your first time. See if you can let go of everything you think you know about yoga and life and spirituality and recovery and me and yourself and have a brand new experience. Um, and that's the practice is to continue to subtract or remove the the ideas, even if they're good ones. I was taught early in my recovery, even if you have a good idea, see if you can let that go. The attachment is what, and that comes up in the book as well, is one of our yogic principles is non-attachment. If we think we have an idea, we're grasping on to what we think recovery is, or we think we know what yoga is, we may be in trouble. We may be setting ourselves up for a lot of disappointment and um, some resentment as well, some judgment. But if we have no ideas, it's weird because I've been actually reading and studying a lot more Zen philosophy recently, and Zen is one of those things where you're not supposed to. It's like Fight Club. We don't talk about Fight Club like that movie. So Zen is like, how do you explain Zen when there's nothing really to explain? It's a practice, and it's not. It's a practice. You just sit, and yoga is very similar. It's just a practice. You get on your mat and you just do it. You just, whatever the thing is, just do it. So if it's sitting and meditating and focusing on your breath or counting your breaths, just do it with no attachment to it. See what comes up. And then if things come up, be willing to let that go. And the same thing with yoga. And when I meant my practice meets me wherever I am, when I was doing a strong vinyasa flow power yoga style practice 10 years ago, I'm not doing that style today, currently. It's not where I am in my life. And thank God my practice is meeting me where I am now because when I need something restorative and something relaxing and gentle, my practice is right there with, oh, I got you. I know what you need, Brian. You need some hip openers, maybe a little back bend, but nothing too strenuous. I know you had a long day, and I'm so grateful that my practice isn't trying to make me get into handstands these days or get into arm balances like it was when I was there in that place. Maybe I'll return to that place, but not these days.
Yeah, I can relate to the evolution of practice. And it just being so multifaceted and always offering what you need if you're open to it. And those are two, I mean, two key chapters are open-mindedness and humility. And I think those are hard ones to keep practicing as we age, but so powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, the open-mindedness piece is huge. That's definitely one of the chapters. And humility, as you mentioned, is I think those are probably two of those two places in my life and recovery where I continue to learn. I'm a father, my daughter is 9, so you can imagine I'm humbled each day if I can stay open-minded. And I have a friend in my recovery, he shares often with me that she's my best teacher. So if I ever start to think I'm a good teacher, I'm a noteworthy teacher, I'm an esteemed or regarded author or whatever it might be, all I have to do is keep my mind open. And I was actually with my daughter today, and we were just outside, and we have a little creek that we were exploring, found some tadpoles, and so I'm watching her just sort of play with the tadpoles, and she's got her feet in the creek, and she's getting her hands in there, and I'm watching, and that was a wonderful teaching moment to just be have no agenda, just explore, just be one with nature. She didn't stick her feet in the mud and go, "Ew, this mud is dirty. This is wet. This is yucky." Uh, she was all in there, and it was just such a neat moment. Like, oh, that's so cool. It's such a beautiful thing. Like just to enjoy the moment without thinking too much about it. Like, oh, my shoes are gonna be wet. My socks are gonna be wet. She didn't care.
Yeah, kids are such, I mean, the innate connection with nature and themselves is so beautiful. Yeah, children are a beautiful lens. And in my experience, always very humbling. So now that you are such an esteemed author and teacher and all those things you were just saying, you're sometimes feeling or reminded that you don't need to define yourself by. What are some of the ways that people can connect with you? I was sampling some of your offerings on Insight Timer. You have the book. Where is it best to connect with you? And what are you doing these days besides sharing your work in all these places?
The best place to find me is brianhymanyoga.com. That has links and access to podcasts, interviews I've done like this one, and articles and the courses that I have on Insight Timer. Insight Timer is great. If anyone is not familiar, Insight Timer is a free app. They have over 100,000, could even be 150,000 free meditations, talks, music tracks for anyone to listen to. And they have courses. It's in their premium section. It's $5 a month. What I love about the courses, I have 10 courses on the app, is they come with an interactive classroom. So what's neat is where you don't just sign up if you're a student for some teacher's course and then you listen to the teacher's recordings or watches his or her videos and that's it. You actually have access to the teacher with Insight Timer. So when students, which is it's beautiful because I live in California. It's pretty unlikely I'm going to meet in the same day students in China and Australia and Canada. But what'll happen is if listeners are in my class, my course on Insight Timer, and they ask a question or leave a comment in the interactive classroom, I moderate the classroom and I can answer, and we can go back and forth, ask a question, answer, share something, share something. It's so neat. So it's one of the reasons I work with them is because they make meditation and mindfulness very accessible, very affordable. And that's a community. It's 28 million people now, I believe, have downloaded that app. So Insight Timer
Yeah,
is a great place to find me.
I'll actually recommend it to clients a lot. So I'm happy I found you on there. And what about the book? Where can they find the book?
The book is available wherever books are sold. It's on Amazon. Here in the States, it's Target. It's Barnes and Noble. It's all the usual places. It's through Shambhala Publications, and Penguin Random House is handling the distribution. So anywhere you can find a book, it should be there online or a lot of bookstores in person as well.
Beautiful. Well, we'll share all your links in the show notes, and I just want to express my gratitude for your wisdom today and your service, which is extensive, and congratulations on your sobriety and yeah, thank you.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
We'll be in touch. Hey there, one last thing I wanted to share with you. If you're enjoying this podcast, it would mean so much to me if you could rate and review it on your favorite podcast platform. It really does help us grow the show, and this being so important to me to get this message out to more women to help them optimize their wellness and ultimately their lives. This is my mission, and I would greatly appreciate it if you could support the podcast by rating and reviewing. Thanks in advance. Have a good one.